Ahoy! I scouted the entire PvP area of the deep desert and I scanned it as well, so you can see the resources everywhere too. I did this last week and I made some changes to how I do it, so let me know if you like this model. We are going to do the PvP zone first and then the PvE zone and PvP zone tomorrow, but I'm going to give you a more detailed overview of the hot zones this time compared to last time, where the really important areas are and where I think you can get most bang for your buck. So this right here is the map as I can display it on the Deep Desert mapping tool from Defense, but there are things that I can't really put on there as there is no option for small deposits, there isn't really an option for the dynamic shipwrecks, and there isn't really a tool to show hot zones of specific things. So this is our baseline, and as you can see, compared to the previous week, there are a lot more area with significant amounts of titanium and stravidium. And this is going to be important right away. I don't mark every area that has a single node of titanium or stravidium. That is most areas because it's a lot more spread out now. But rather, if you see this icon, then there is a decent, a medium or high density of these resources. If you don't see it, then you might still have a smaller density, which we'll get to in a little bit. What you can immediately see here is that there's a massive middle stretch going throughout H, especially where we have a lot of resources, but even stretching into I multiple times this week. So going deeper into the desert really gets rewarded this time. Also when it comes to spice, though there is an interesting outlier there with a large spice field on E5. All of the spice fields that I'm showing here are only the large ones. All of the spice fields that are marked on here are only the very large ones, the ring mouth ones, and not the medium or smaller ones. Especially smaller ones seem to be more all over the place anyways, but there are still hot zones and we will talk about those. Now I've made my own modified version of the map with some more details which you can see here. The first thing we need to talk about are the little cyan dots in the top left corner, in case you're colorblind. Those will always be the top left ones, which are on a few different fields. You can see that on I5, on G2, F2, E2 even. These are just little fields of titanium or stravidium that I couldn't mark in a way where it doesn't look like there's a lot there, because it is really just a couple here and there, 1, 2, 3 maybe, sprinkled in, but still worth knowing if you're flying through these areas that you could have a quick look and just dip down for one of them. Though it's worth keeping in mind that the ones in E2 in particular will probably be very contested because there are tons and tons of bases there, so it's possible that you can't even reach that on your server and somebody might have built over it. The red dots in the right-hand corner of various areas are the ones where are found the dynamic shipwrecks. So for example, in I2, in E3, in E4, in G7, G8, and H7. Keep in mind, these are not nearly all of the locations where shipwrecks can be. There are tons and tons and tons all over the place. These are just the ones that I came across while I was looking around. So really, there's probably at least double this. I did cross-check with the Planetologist app a little bit, which is another website that also does this kind of thing, and they have some different locations for those too, though they have some incorrect locations for other things at the moment. For example, there's an extra spice field on I8, which I'm pretty sure doesn't exist. And speaking of spice fields and I8, let's talk about the colored areas here. The first area that you'll see is the one in the top right around H8, H9, I8, and I9. This is the absolute spice hot zone this week. First of all, you have a large spice field in H8, but there are also tons of medium spice fields around it. When I was there were 2 medium spice fields in very close vicinity to each other, in addition to the large spice fields that exist there, and then there was a smaller field just a little bit further north as well. So this seems to be the area that is best if you are purely out there for spice. Unfortunately, there aren't that many areas to build underneath it. If we're looking at E, then you can see in E9 there's a very bottom area where you can build a little bit, or a little bit in E8, but really not all too much until you go further down here to E6. I've thrown up a little base there, but you'll see that all of these areas are probably fairly crowded on your server. So if you're going all the way up into the corner here, for the spice farm. There's also some other resources here. There's this area in particular that has a little bit of titanium and stravidium, so it's worth farming for that. That's probably going to be one of the safer spots unless you're there during a larger spice field, in which case it will probably become very, very contested. But there's also something nice nearby. Again, if we look at our map here, you can see a little cyan circle that I put there that's kind of see-through. That is sector G7, and you can see that there is a Stravidium island here that is purely Stravidium. Once again, the resources on this map are not accurate to the amount of actual nodes that are there. There are a lot more here, though this is not as concentrated as the other islands that we'll still get to, but still absolutely concentrated enough if you're looking to farm Stravidium. And there's also a control point along with that. If you appreciate the work that I'm doing here and you want to see the second part as well, where I break down more of the areas tomorrow, then consider subscribing and clicking the bell. Now let's look a little bit closer at the other side, which is around H5, H4, G4, G5-ish. It's not really in H5 itself, but this island here, this is your Titanium island for the week, and it kind of borders all of these areas. It's mainly in G4, but it kind of goes up and to the side, and all of these have tons and tons of titanium. Absolutely worth farming if you can. Also likely a highly contested area. Again, there are many bases that are not too far away from this. There are many other areas that are worth farming around, so even if people fly here and realize there's nothing there, they might fly over and have a look there, but then come back here anyways. And it's the only titanium island that I think we have, as far as I was able to find. And not only that, if we go a little bit further, just over here to H3, basically neighboring this almost, we have the most concentrated Stravidium island between H3 and G3. Once again, way more nodes than it's showing here. Every one of these small islands is probably enough to fill a scout almost. So this is going to be very, very highly contested, very relevant area, and not too far from a spice area. As you can see as well, there is a ring mouth in H2, so we will see a lot of competition here. But even if you go further north from there, there are still significant amount of resources. Even if you go further south, you also have a lab there, and then you have another lab as well in G6. So this whole middle stretch that we are looking at here is probably going to be very, very interesting this week. It generally seems to be designed for a fair bit of conflict, as you can see just from the amount of useful resources that we are seeing here. Like every island pretty much has something good, so you kind of have every reason to go here and just check the space out, and that will probably lead to a lot more fighting than I would have expected, or than we see usually around these areas I saw in previous weeks. But also it means that the general resource availability is just significantly higher than it was in previous weeks, and that will help spread out the farm, because again, if you are getting too pressured in the inner areas, there's always areas like the one up in I9 that are a lot safer, and they will still give you resources, or like H8 for example, which has a decent amount of resources too. Keep in mind that all of this is just to the best of my knowledge, because people may have been farming things while we're looking. We had to double check some areas, thanks to Nux, who also went around with me and had a second eye on it just in case. So yeah, it could be that there's some more, and if I find more by tomorrow, I will of course let you know, so I can update the map accordingly. And then we'll cover the PvE area as well. We're going to talk about the checkpoints, the houses as well, if you are interested in that. Everything that I didn't cover in detail here. Can talk a little bit about base location and so on. So if you want to see the second part that covers everything, then consider subscribing and clicking the bell. Thanks to all my patrons for supporting this video, and thank you for watching. SLOTH, out.